Hello there everybody, Martin here from Affinity for Commander. Today we're going to be counting down my top 5 picks for the strongest commander to be printed in Murders at Karlov Manor. We will also be including legendary creatures printed in the commander decks and the Cluedo set that were released at the same time as Karlov Manor, so don't be angry with me if you see any of those in this list, you have been warned. But before we begin, if you use any of these websites to make your purchases, then be sure to use our affiliate links in the video description. It won't cost you anything extra to use these, but it really helps out the channel a lot. Also, if you haven't already, then be sure to check out our latest sponsor, tcghome.com. If you're anything like me, you like to know where all of your cards are without having to search through boxes and folders of cards to find the one card you want, and that's where TCG Home comes in handy. This website allows you to digitize your collection and even include tags for certain things such as which deck you've put the card in. This can be a real lifesaver, especially when you live with someone who just takes cards for their decks hoping you don't notice. Alex. But with that out of the way, let's take a look at our list. Starting off at number 5, we have everybody's favourite psychotic murderer, Massacre Girl Known Killer. For 2 generic and 2 black mana, Massacre Girl is a 4/4 human assassin with menace. She also reads, creatures you control have Wither. They deal damage to creatures in the form of -1/-1 counters. Also, whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, if its toughness was less than 1, draw a card. So what makes Massacre Girl such a strong commander to lead your mono black deck? Well, for a start, she lets you draw cards whenever your opponent's creatures leave the battlefield of less than 1 toughness, which, considering you're building your deck around this in a 4-player game of Commander, is likely to happen quite often. And as any blue player will tell you, drawing cards really helps with finding and hitting your land drops, as well as refilling your hand to cast all those lovely spells. Secondly, Massacre Girl's ability gives all of your creatures Wither, meaning that every time your opponents block or are blocked by one of your creatures, they'll receive a permanent debuff even if they survive the conflict. This can drastically affect how players approach combat, as even their biggest and strongest creatures will eventually succumb to your 1/1s if they attack or are blocked by you, so it can make them choose to block and attack other players instead. And thanks to Armankhet and Shadowmoor, we actually have quite a bit of -1/-1 counter support. Necroskitter allows you to reanimate your opponent's destroyed creatures under your control, provided that they died of a -1/-1 counter on them, which for only 3 mana is absolutely bonkers value. Nest of Scarabs will generate you a 1/1 insect whenever you put a -1/-1 counter on a creature, which combined with Massacre Girl's ability to give your Scarabs Wither, will replace themselves if destroyed in combat. And Crumbling Ashes will allow you to destroy a creature with a -1/-1 counter on it during each of your upkeeps, meaning that a single point of damage will be enough to destroy any creature on the board. Now that is scary. Yes, Massacre Girl is definitely strong enough to make your opponent sweat a little when they see her at the table. All you need to do now is find new ways to wither away your opponent's life totals. Up next we have the angelic guild leader of the Boros Legion, none other than Aelia, the Law Above. For 3 generic, a red and a white, Aelia is a 4/4 legendary angel with flying, vigilance and haste. She also reads, whenever a player attacks with 3 or more creatures, you draw a card. And whenever a player attacks with 5 or more creatures, Aelia the Law Above deals 3 damage to each of your opponents and you gain 3 life. Similarly to Massacre Girl, Aelia can help you to draw cards during combat, using one of Boros' greatest strengths to compensate for their greatest weakness. And the fact that this ability triggers every combat and not just your own means that you could be drawing up to 4 extra cards per turn cycle, which is absolutely fantastic for a red-white deck. In addition to this, Aelia rewards you and punishes your opponents whenever somebody attacks with 5 or more creatures, and although 3 life might not seem like a lot, it only takes 3 activations of this to take off a quarter of each of your opponent's life totals and gain you nearly a quarter back. As I mentioned earlier, all you need to have this commander shine is gently persuade your opponents to attack each combat. This can of course be done via force, using cards such as Disrupt Decorum to goad your opponent's creatures into attacking. This also has the added bonus of making it so your opponents have very few untapped creatures left, so they will be open when you decide to attack them the turn after. Or if you're feeling a little bit more political, consider cards that reward your opponent for attacking, such as Fire Main Commando. Channel your inner Rumpelstiltskin, make some deals, do whatever it takes to make sure that your opponents are attacking and triggering your commander as much as possible. And of course, you're going to want to be running a decent amount of removal in case your opponents decide to start attacking you instead of each other. I personally enjoy keeping 4 mana open and persuading my opponents that I have a Settle a Wreckage in hand. Whether or not I do or not, they don't want to attack and find out. If you like Aelia the lore above and want to see a full deck list for her, then be sure to check out the video that Alex made on this the other week, which can be found in the video description here. So, is Aelia the lore above the Boros commander to end all Boros commanders? Probably not, but she's still really good and I can get behind that. Well done, Wizards. Taking the number 3 slot on this list, we have Simic Explorer of Cryptozoology, Lonus Genetics Expert. For 1 generic and 2 hybrid green-blue mana, we have a 1/2 legendary Snake Elf Detective who has Evolve. Lonus also reads, whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on Lonus, investigate that many times. Also, whenever you sacrifice a clue, put a +1/+1 counter on another target creature you control. Well, this iteration of the Simic Snake Elf is definitely an improvement over their last appearance. Firstly, we have a rather neat +1/+1 counter synergy which generates a clue whenever Lonus gets one of these counters. And to aid this, Lonus' Evolve ability will naturally see them get counters as you play stronger and stronger creatures, generating you a decent amount of clues throughout the game without having to do anything at all. Next, we have a payoff for sacrificing clues, and do keep in mind that this text does not require you to sacrifice clues to themselves, it only cares that they are sacrificed. Being able to put +1/+1 counters on other creatures at instant speed is a neat little combat trick, but I think this will really shine in combos, which we'll discuss in just a little while. So what cards should you put in a Lonus deck? Well, let's start with some counter doubling shenanigans in the form of Hardened Scales. This type of card also has the added bonus of doubling the number of clues you produce, as Lonus creates clues equal to the number of +1/+1 counters put on them, not just each occurrence of their ability triggering. This will end up with us having a bigger creature, more clues to sacrifice, and more cards to draw from this. Win-win. In addition to this, you should be running cards that take advantage of the number of clues we produce, such as Jaheira, Friend of the Forest, who turns each of our clues into mana rocks. Brilliant. And finally, we come to the real juicy stuff, the combo pieces. There are a number of cards out there that allow you to sacrifice artifacts to gain mana or put +1/+1 counters on creatures, such as Extruder is an example of the latter. This particular card will allow you to sacrifice a clue to put a +1/+1 counter on Lonus, who will, as a result, generate another clue, allowing you to repeat this process to make your commander as big as you like. But if you have a token or counter doubling effect, you can use this to make infinite clues, which, with other cards that sacrifice your artifacts to make mana, can result in you having infinite mana. Yes, Lonus is certainly a sneaky little snake who will likely slip under the radar of most commander players. Don't let that be you. Coming in second on our list, we have another Rakdos legend in the form of Judith, Carnage Connoisseur. For 3 generic, 1 black and 1 red mana, we have a 3/4 human shaman with the following ability. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, choose 1. That spell gains Death Touch and Lifelink. Or, create a 2/2 red imp creature token with when this creature dies, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. It's not very often we see a black-red spellslinger commander, but Judith fits that description very well. Being able to generate 2/2 blockers whenever you cast a spell that when they die shock each of your opponents is a lovely little addition to any spell that you cast. No complaints of this one at all. However, for me, it's the other option of Judith's ability that really makes her shine. Death Touch turns even the smallest point of damage into a removal spell, and Lifelink allows you to stabilise all that lost life that you had from your opponents attacking you, or life you've used to cast spells as a resource. Cards such as Blazing Volley deal 1 damage to each of your opponent's creatures, which with Judith out can be lethal, without even touching your own creatures, which I think is absurd, and there are plenty of other cards just like this. And taking a look at the other keyword granted by this ability, cards such as Blasphemous Act will deal 13 damage to each creature in play, gaining you 13 times that number as life. So you'll be sitting pretty on 3 digits of life, whilst everyone else is struggling to rebuild their boards. And of course, what Spellslinger deck would be complete without the inclusion of cards such as Young Pyromancer, which generate you tokens, which in addition to Judith's tokens, helps you to create a vast army in very little time at all. Hopefully after these few examples you can see why I put Judith as number 2 on this list. She is extremely powerful and deserves this spot in my humble opinion. And finally, we come to number 1 on this list, the best commander to be printed in Murders at Karlov Manor and their supplementary products. Voja, Jaws of the Conclave is a 5/5 legendary wolf costing 2 generic, 1 red, 1 green and 1 white mana. They have Vigilance, Trample and Ward 3, and as if that wasn't enough, they also read: whenever Voja, Jaws of the Conclave attacks, put X+1/+1 counters on each creature you control, where X is the number of elves you control. Draw a card for each wolf you control. So, I'm not quite sure how this card made it to print without anyone at R&D questioning its power level, but alas, here we are. A 5/5 for 5 mana with this collection of keywords is certainly powerful on its own, but when the keywords are the worst part of the card, you know you're in trouble when you're sat across some table from this. A deck full of mana dorks such as Llanowar Elves will easily be able to get Voja out turn 3 or 4, and will be able to make paying the command attacks trivial should anyone pay the additional 3 mana required to remove them. But let's say you haven't managed to ramp ahead at silly speeds and you only have 3 elves out when you decide to attack with Voja. In this instance, you'll still be putting 3 +1/+1 counters on each of your creatures, including Voja themselves, and drawing a card thanks to Voja being a wolf. So now you have an 8/8 Trampling Vigilance Ward 3 legendary creature attacking your opponents, and each of your mana dorks are at the very least 4/4s. This is ridiculously powerful. And whilst building an elf heavy deck might seem the obvious choice for Voja, don't underestimate the power of this Puppa's card draw ability. Feels like card draw is definitely a big theme for this list, and in every colour apart from blue. Weird. Anyway, type altering cards such as Maskwood Nexus will allow you to draw a card for each elf you control, which will probably be more elves which you can put onto the field and ramp like absolutely crazy. And finally, cards that care about +1/+1 counters such as Inspiring Call will make easy homes in this deck, because drawing cards is always good. And just like Aelia, Alex has made a deck tag for Voja, which you can find in the description box of this video below, so go and check it out if you're interested in this wolf. Well, that is it for my list. I do hope that you have enjoyed it. Do you agree with the creatures I've chosen? Are there any that I've missed out? Leave me a message below in the comments section and I'll be sure to read it. Just before I go, I'd like to give a huge thank you to each and every one of our incredible patrons, without whom we'd be unable to continue making content such as this. If you would like to become a patron of the channel yourself, then be sure to check out our Patreon page, which can be found in the description box. Also, don't forget that you can help to support the channel in 4 quick and easy ways: liking this video, subscribing, hitting that bell icon, and leaving us a comment. I read every one. But that's all for now though, we'll see you next time. Stay awesome!